Now, as a congressman, Adam Kinzinger is calling for immediate U.S. military intervention in Iraq, and he's our guest now. Congressman, it's nice to have you on the program.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you would do today.
Look, this is a bad situation, but I think the thing to keep in mind is, of all the scenarios that we've talked about that could happen in Iraq, this is the worst case scenario. So I think we need to come in with airstrikes. I think we've got to pin ISIS down in the towns that they're in. Now, there's going to be some concern, and legitimately so, with bombing ISIS targets in villages and cities, and I understand that. But we can freeze their movements when they're in the open desert by taking out these convoys of trucks we're seeing, and then that gives the Iraqi army breathing space to reform and to move in and take back this territory, as well as come up with a political solution, which needs to happen in Iraq. But I think the fall of the Iraqi state right now would be the worst case scenario, and one that I think the region would have a very hard time recovering from.
A few questions about what you're advocating for, but quickly first, what is the goal? If you could map out the ultimate goal for the United States in Iraq today, what would it be?
Well, the first and foremost goal is our national security, and an ISIS-controlled Iraq or Iraq and Syrian region would be just devastating to our national security and would really put us at risk of having something like 9/11 or greater than that. But the immediate goal in the region, I think, is the preservation of the Iraqi state. We know that there's a lot of political implications in Iraq. Al-Maliki has been far from a good leader of that country, and there needs to be some reconciliation and fixes there. But right now we're on the doorstep of that whole state falling. If that falls, you have complete and utter lawlessness in the region. So I think that's something that, as the president's looking at his options, it's probably going to have a robust air campaign, not just a few drone strikes, probably some special forces on the ground, not in direct combat, but helping to pinpoint locations of the enemy.
So the question then becomes, how do you contain that? If that is what you'd like to do today, some airstrikes, special forces on the ground, how do you prevent us from becoming more involved in a civil war? That's the concern of some retired military officers speaking to the Washington Post today. What would you say to them?
Yeah, and it's completely understandable. I mean, in 2006 and 2007, there were a lot of people just advocating to let Iraq chew itself up, leave, and, let everybody kill each other, and there was kind of that advocation. The reality is then Bush stepped up and said, we're going to do the surge, and he had the war won. The war was won in 2011 when we left, and so I think the idea of just saying, get out, we don't want to get involved in the middle of the thing, is a defeatist attitude, which really isn't natural to the United States. So I think, look, go in with airstrikes. If those aren't successful, I mean, then it is what it is. We're going to continue to see the worst-case scenario play out. But I think it gives an option to buy breathing space for the Iraqi government and to help them to take back the territory that they lost. This also goes into Syria, by the way. This is not just limited to Iraq. Syria has a lot of open areas where there are ISIS camps flourishing.
And they certainly have had a hold there for several years now. Congressman, I can't tell you what a relief it is to talk to someone that has actually been involved in the Iraq War. It's nice to have your voice on the program because obviously there's been few and far between of those who have actually served on the ground in Iraq. So I ask this next question with that in mind. There are those that are also advocating, and I believe you're one of them, to go back and use the special forces to train, to engage the Iraqi forces. But we've also heard these reports, and our viewers certainly have, that Iraqi security forces are deserting, laying down their weapons. They're not organized. They're not motivated. Why would we want to pour more time and money and effort into these forces?
It's a very good and legitimate question. Keep in mind, by the way, this whole problem in Iraq, Fallujah, a number of months ago, so this is not a surprise to anybody. But why would we want to go back and train them? I think you have got to have. Al-Maliki has to either resign or step down. He's got to have a political solution which pulls Sunnis into the government, as we had when we were there. And, at the end of the day, I don't think we can wait for that to happen, though, before we act. You go in, you train the forces, you stiffen their spine. I think having American leadership there causes them to fight. But that political solution is the ultimate goal. But keep in mind, the Iraqi military, since we left in 2011, has really been kind of rotting away in a state of disrepair. And while there's a lot of brave Iraqis on the ground that wants to fight, when your general leaves and when your colonel leaves, you're not going to fight. That would even happen in the American military. If all the officers abandoned, people would say, well, what are we fighting for then? So I think to get in there and have that political solution, but buy the breathing space for it, is our goal right now, and it's something that we need to do.
Okay, with that breathing space, focusing on a political solution, what are your thoughts about our communication right now with Tehran, and in some cases trying to figure out how to work with Tehran? You're already shaking your head no. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, the enemy of our enemy is still our enemy, and maybe momentarily our interests align, which is ISIS is so bad that even Tehran doesn't like them. But keep in mind, through the 2000s, part of the reason Iraq and a lot of what we were fighting in Iraq was against Iranian meddling in Iraq. Iran was trying to destabilize Iraq from the very beginning. The EFPs, explosive form penetrators, which were the IEDs that were killing a lot of our soldiers, is believed to be Iranian technology that was exported to Iraq. This idea that we found a new bestie in Iran is just ludicrous. And so while they may have a temporary interest in pushing ISA back, and if Iraq coordinates with them, that's on Iraq's back, but I think that is a very bad precedent for the United States to come in and say we found a new ally in Iran, because keep in mind the bigger picture here, we still have to deal with the Iranian nuclear issue. And how are we going to do that after we just ask Iran to come in and save us in Iraq?
It's a good question. It's one we're going to be talking about. I know back in January, you were the one calling for military intervention into Iraq and paying close attention, which is something I wanted to add to our viewers so that they know, because a lot of people feel like we were caught off guard, but there were some in Congress that were raising a red flag about it. Congressman, I hope you come back. Thanks so much for the time today.
I'd love to. Thanks for